Let's go back to the shock coalition split and how, more broadly, this is reflecting a global trend with historic two-party systems breaking down across the West. At least so says my next guest, foreign editor at the Australian, Greg Sheridan. Well, you wrote a really thoughtful piece today, Greg, that the Liberal National parties are not immune to the sort of breakdowns we're seeing overseas. I'm interested to pull this apart. What do you think is driving this? And here in Australia in particular, what do you think are the chances of reconciliation?
Well, Peter, it's great to be with you. I think all over the West, politics is in a half-concealed crisis. Political systems are not any longer able to adjudicate difficult policy issues, come up with a solution, put the solution to the people, get voted in, implement the policy and then see whether it works or not. And as a result, voters are getting more and more frustrated. You're seeing the collapse of the two-party system in Britain. Even though Labor has a big majority, it's miles behind in the polls. The leading party in the polls now is the Reform Party. There are 5 parties who are significant in the polls and have big representations at Westminster. The traditional centre-right parties have been completely disappeared and replaced in France and Italy. And in Germany and in Ireland, the centre-right and centre-left parties have to be in a kind of hopeless coalition of the collapsing mainstream against radical opponents. That would be like Liberal and Labor going into coalition in Australia against the Greens and the Teals, which may very well happen one day. Now, the problem with the Liberal and National split, I got quite a lot of sympathy with the Nats here, but the big problem is that it means that they're not an alternative government while ever they're split. They, you know, in the Westminster system, the party, the party or the coalition has to make the internal trade-offs and present a coherent program to the people, whereas the Liberals will go to the election, Nats will go to the election, and should they form a majority between the two, they'll then have to hammer out their policy compromises after the election. I think that's going to be a very hard sell. And so it leaves Labor as the only real party of government.
I mean, key in the blue, let's be honest, wasn't about all the other regionally based policies that they wanted in the coalition agreement document. The big one was nuclear. 2 weeks ago, on May the 3rd, nuclear was a policy that they all agreed on. Now, clearly, there's internal divisions. But what staggers me, that we in Australia are having fight about a technology, about nuclear power, that the rest of the world are embracing. You know, we've seen that move this week from Germany. They've removed their opposition to nuclear power. We've got nuclear in Canada. They're ramping it up even more so in the UK. And even in the UK, they're at least having a debate about net zero. I'm not saying dump net zero, but surely we're big enough to have the debate. Tony Blair says we've got to have a debate. That's hardly a radical position.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, Peter. And I've had a day today talking mainly to National Party people, and I'm sort of half having my mind a little bit changed. One of the problems with the Liberal Party in the last few years is it's been neither Arthur nor Martha. It doesn't really believe in net zero. And the truth is, you and I can say this because we're commentators, not political leaders. Net zero is a completely fraudulent concept. You cannot have human activity on this planet and have net
Greg,
zero
they'll
carbon
tell you
emissions.
that if you talk to them on the phone. You and I know
Absolutely.
when you talk to Liberals, most of them, they'll say it's a crock.
Yeah, you do any calculation. I mean, net zero relies on every aeroplane flying on biofuel. Well, when is that going to happen? Give me a break. Russia, China, India, and now the United States, Indonesia, all the great big emitters in the world couldn't give tuppence for net zero and are blasting ahead with coal-fired power stations at 1 million miles an hour. They're doing a lot of renewables as well. But the problem with the Liberal Party is it hasn't had the courage of its convictions or the courage of its lack of convictions. So it can't say net zero is a fraud. We're not sceptics about climate change. We're going to reduce emissions, but we're not going to tie ourselves to an impossible target. And yes, we're going to have nuclear energy, although I think the specifics of those 6 or 7 power plants was a bit problematic. They can't really do that. But if you're going to do that, you've got to do it with energy. You've got to go at 1 million miles an hour. You've got to go like Tony Abbott or Kevin Rudd when they were opposition leaders. Get on every program, argue your case at every time, unleash every one of your front benches. But then they don't have the courage of their lack of convictions either. They can't say, yes, we've signed up to net zero. We really believe it and we're going to do it better than Labor. What they do is try to say, well, we're going to say nothing on net zero, hope you don't notice, and we're going to win the election on the basis that we're going to take 20 cents off a litre of petrol at the petrol station. It doesn't work. I mean, the great counterexample to how politics can work is The Voice. Just, you know, when Jacinta Price came out against The Voice, it had 65% public approval. All the Liberals pollsters were telling them they had to go with The Voice. Jacinta Price forced the Nationals to go against The Voice. The Nationals forced the Liberals. They won the argument. They won a huge victory. But they're not brave enough to do that on most policy areas.
I tell you, whenever we have fought net zero or its permutations of carbon schemes, a whole box and dice, carbon taxes, as an economic issue, as you say, with conviction, we have won the war. When we don't even get on the field, as we did with the nuclear debate, we dropped the policy and we ran, we're punished for it. Great analysis, Greg. Thank you.